Peace, everyone. This is Tierney Sharif from African Esquire TV. I recorded a video a few days ago and I wanted to play the video, but before I do, I want to add some more context just for people who may not understand fully the situation as it has been happening historically. If you don't know, of course, in the United States and all over the world, there's been a lie that has been pushed in Christian churches that are complicit with the white supremacist system. And in my opinion, the vast majority of the churches have fit that description. And the lie that they have been complicit with is this idea that Zionism is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Now, I'm not going to go all into different scriptures and everything. I'm well aware that not everyone in this channel adheres to certain faiths, and that's honestly not the purpose of this video. But the purpose of this video is to say that this is a propaganda mechanism that has been used to justify in the minds of many people this idea of having an apartheid state inside of 2021. And it's interesting. I seen this video of this pastor, or I assume he's a pastor, some guy who's an African. And he is basically one of these ones, l- from what I could see, he seems very close to Massa, honestly. And he outs himself by really showing that there was an intentional effort to appeal to African people in the United States to support Zionism. And the way that they have found that is most effective, that they have been able to support Zionism, get support from the Africans in the United States for Zionism, has been through the church, because the church has not been a critical thinker when it comes to information that has been put in front of it, specifically from the institutions that have put the theology in place for people who are African to then interpret and not question. And that's very interesting to hear from this guy. So I want you to hear it from him. He's going to tell you how there is an intentional effort to ensure that African people are complicit with Zionism, because that essentially legitimizes what is happening as far as having a settler colony state, which is obviously something that they want to be legitimized for by Africans, because we know that Africans overwhelmingly have been subjected to apartheid. But then also listen to him describe how Dr. Martin Luther King was used. And at the time, he wasn't knowledgeable about what was happening inside of Palestine, but he was used to enforce the idea that this system was just. So listen to the words out of this man's own mouth, and then I think that will help you understand some more of this purpose of this video.
We say this all the time. Israel is the only state that we talk about whether or not it should exist. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I don't think Iran should exist anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think Kenya should exist anymore.
Yeah.
But somehow we have those types of philosophical conversations about Israel, this tiny state the size of New Jersey in the Middle East. We talk about whether or not it has who even says the right to exist? Nobody says that even.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the Jews and the state of Israel, somehow it's okay to have that conversation.
Yeah. And you put in your book, your book, why is this such a big issue? With the election coming up in here in November, and with the new president that's going to step in, this is a cutting edge issue. And specifically, why is it an issue that the Black community should care about? Why is that something that...
It's interesting because, and this is what we tell young people as we're traveling across the country and pastors and everything, whether they're Black pastors or other pastors as well, but particularly within the Black church, that even though the Black community is something like 12% of the population, somehow its opinion of Zionism is Dr. King in the 1960s. They go to Dr. King, what do you have to say about it? Here he is fighting for civil rights for his own people.
Yeah.
But the world wants to know what he thinks about why. Because what he says carries weight. Because if somebody from the Black community says something about oppression and Zionism and racism type of thing, maybe it has more weight. Is that true? Maybe or maybe not, but at least that's the perception.
Yeah.
So this is part of what goes on now. So this modern day fight is focused more so now than ever before. During Operation Protective Edge in 2014, when Israel had one of its many conflicts with Gaza, the Hamas in Gaza, what you had was the delegitimizers of Israel began a conflation of from Ferguson to Palestine. In other words, what was going on in Ferguson, Missouri at that same time was happening, the war was going on in Israel, and you had Israel's enemies saying, just the same way that cops are oppressing black people in Ferguson, so are the Israelis. None of that had anything to do, they were apples and oranges, had nothing to do with each other, but and you're talking to people and it's an emotional appeal, a propaganda appeal, and you're not going to look at facts and what's actually going on the ground.
So you begin to have a heart for the Palestinians,
absolutely, because
you're comparing the situation.
Absolutely, and that's been going on since the 60s.
Okay. Yes. Now, what percentage of the black church is Zionist and is not, or what's that battle you're waging there?
We don't know about it in terms of church. What we do know, and I'm quoting, and I can send it to you because I'm kind of doing by memory here. There were different polls that were taken by Pew, a couple of other huge organizations, even from the last 40 years till now.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is that, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll give you the figures, the overwhelming majority of the black community is pro-Israel.
Yeah.
They may not be very involved in the political issues, those types of things, but they're not. You have always had an anti-Zionist fringe within the black community. The whole targeting the community, the race relations, those types of things would sometimes make it somewhat more than it would be in other demographics. Once again, you have a lot of stuff that's directed at the black community, but it has always been a misnomer that some sort of majority of the black community is anti-Israel. It has never been true, and it's not true today.
Okay, so that's just a total myth.
Yes.
So you see right there that he's outing himself. I mean, he's an agent of white supremacy. He's an agent of white supremacy, and he's using the melanin in his skin as a shield, kind of, to go into African churches and tell the people you should support Zionism. But the ultimate reason is because to be a counter narrative, particularly among Africans who can see through it, us who are struggling against imperialism, colonialism, white supremacy, he has to go and try to get the people who are unaware of their condition of a colonized people, to co-sign. So this should let you know right there that this is something that African people have to deal with in general, to know that there is an intentional effort to ensure that African people are sucked in to this ideology that makes no logical sense and is very inhumane as we're seeing it played out. I also want to throw this thing out there that it's funny that Dr. King was used for Zionism. You should also ask, why did the Anti-Defamation League spy on Dr. Martin Luther King? I've yet to see those documents released. One other thing, though, that I wanted to do to add context, and so I plan on doing a follow-up video about Zionism and racism. But even if you want to stay within the context of religion, if you're someone who is a Christian and you feel like you're going to be a Zionist, you should understand how Christians are also treated inside of Israel. So I want to play this video just to give you some context, maybe something you have not seen before, to help you understand that this ideology that you've been co-signing is completely off the hinges.
When Trump says that Israel is one of the great democracies in the world, I would say that's the biggest bullshit I've ever had.
We're here in Bethlehem, home to an ancient Palestinian Christian community, to hear what they have to say about Christians in the West supporting Israel, Donald Trump's move to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and to see what life is really like here for Christians living in the occupied West Bank.
I always try to tell my child that we don't hate Israelis, but we hate what they are doing to us. My name is Marwan Harp. I'm a Christian living in Palestine, Bethlehem. When I hear that Christians in the West are helping Israel, thinking that they are helping Christians in Palestine, I think they're mistaken. Israel is who to blame. They took everything, man. They took all your life since you're a child.
There's understanding between Christians and Muslims that live here. There's a lot of differences as well.
And who care about us, the Muslim, Muslim Palestinian, they care more than the Christian in the world. So our brother, they are the Palestinian Muslims, not the Christian in the world.
I tell my brothers and sisters from other nations, Christians, I tell them to support us. My name is Sandy Kumsiya. I'm a Christian Palestinian. We are here in Bethlehem. It's really sad here.
What happens to anyone who speak against the Israeli government here? If they will notice that there's someone might make a threat for them, they will come in less than 10 minutes and take him away and will be in jail.
Some of the most basic rights, human rights, are not given to us.
We have a problem with the government and the rules they set.
Freedom of movement, freedom of speech, just freedom in general, we don't have it.
And this is it, the separation barrier, also known as the apartheid wall. It separates Bethlehem and the occupied West Bank from Jerusalem, meaning that for Christians to visit their holy sites, they need to go through an Israeli checkpoint and get Israel's permission.
Basically, you're not allowed to breathe unless you take their permission.
They control how much water we get.
So we get the water like 1 day in the month. So this is a big problem. No one know about that and no one care about that.
What I think of the US recognizing Israel, Jerusalem, that the capital of Israel.
هذا غلط كبير. ترامب ما له حق يعطي إسرائيل دولة.
They can claim it the capital of China if they want. Doesn't make any difference to us.
لأنه القدس عاصمة فلسطين.
We want peace, of course we want peace, but we want a balanced peace and fair peace.
Are afraid because there was an escalation, very dangerous escalation.
That escalation is of hate crimes against Christians in Israel. In this Jerusalem church, the words "Jesus is garbage" was scrawled on the side wall. At the Vatican's Jerusalem headquarters, recent graffiti threatened death to Arabs and Christians and all those who hate Israel. The church believes the perpetrators are ultra-nationalist Orthodox Jews. Outside the site, believed to be both King David's tomb and the Last Supper room, they protest a rumor the building will be handed over to the Vatican.
If someone will give up 1 inch from that tomb, they'll start a war between Jews and Christians. God forgive us.
Israeli police must protect everyone equally, and they say they're trying to protect Christians.
Action has been taken in the past by police operations as well as undercover operations, not just the Israeli National Police, but also secret security services who have also been involved. That's how seriously we're taking and dealing with those incidents.
But the church believes this isn't only about police. The Holy Land's top Catholic official says some Israeli schools teach hate. Some Israeli politicians preach exclusion.
If you've been comfortable seeing Muslims being the victims of these types of attacks, and now all of a sudden you want to see this for what it is, you should question your morals, to be honest. But I wanted to put that in there for if this video does reach people who just don't know, African people particularly, who don't know, who've been lied to, and are unaware of why there's an intentional effort to get them to support this apartheid regime. So with that, I'm going to play the video as I originally recorded it. Peace family, welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. Before I get started, please do like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, but also I ask that you add yourself to my Telegram channel. Telegram is a decentralized platform, so you can get updates from me on there. In addition, please add yourself to my channel on Odyssey. Odyssey is a lot like YouTube, but is also a decentralized platform. Today, I want to talk about something that has been bothering me for a long, long time. But I think whenever you have moments where it's very clear that oppression is happening, it's very clear that people are dying, and you see people who profess to care, profess to love humanity, feel silenced because they have been taught doctrine that is incorrect, that has to be bothersome. So I'm talking specifically inside of the context of the African church or the Black church. We know, for example, that many of us are subscribed to a religious doctrine that has been used to colonize, used to enslave. And in this case, it's been used to justify Zionism. Now, this is something that should be a concern to everyone for many reasons, for multiple reasons. One, we should know, obviously, that different forces have preyed on our community in different ways. And they look for the institutions that they look for being most opportune to impose their views and to be accepted. And unfortunately, particularly in a modern context, you see a lot of people who think that they are standing for what's right, standing for justice, co-signing oppression, and not questioning who taught them that in the first place. So what I just want to do is give those people some perspective on what's happening today. So as you've seen, I'm sure on the news, and if you've not seen it, I will post a video because I want this to be real to everyone. We have to understand that people are suffering as we speak inside of Palestine.
In a moment, with a phone call from the Israeli army, another Gaza high-rise became a condemned building, minutes ticking down on a 1-hour warning. This, the office of the Associated Press, as its staff made instant decisions about what they needed to salvage to keep on working. Across the lift lobby, staff from the Al Jazeera bureau were doing the very same thing. On the street outside, the building's owner pleading for a stay of execution.
We need 10 minutes. As you can see, they're all around me. The press, not people who are going in to get weapons out.
But there was no arguing, not even about the timing.
انهار البرج انهار البرج انهار البرج.
Al Jazeera Gaza journalist Safwat Al-Khalout was live on air as he watched his workplace of 11 years vanish in front of him.
We panicked, frankly, we panicked. How to leave, when to leave, what to take, where to go. These are like the quick and the fast things that you think of when something like that happens.
This building was home to families as well as media companies, more to add to the list of homeless in a besieged enclave during days of intensive attacks from the sky. In a statement,
now people have also been suffering all over the world under this same system. And I think that's the thing that's really being divorced from reality. We're made to think that the Israelis are doing something that is just unconnected to the global colonial system. But if you feel for yourself, if you feel for yourself in Nigeria, if you feel for yourself in Cameroon, if you feel for yourself in the Dominican Republic, if you feel for yourself in certain places, you cannot divorce that from what's happening right as we speak inside of the Israeli apartheid system. But we've been manipulated, I think, because unfortunately, all you have to do is put something and say that this is the word of God, and many people will not question it. Let's look inside of what actually happened with Zionism. I'm not going to break down why Zionism is something that is racism in this particular video. I hope to do that in a later video. And I'm also not going to break down the relationship between Zionism and how it has been misused as a religious doctrine. But I will, in this very video, put a link to Kwame Toure's speech on Zionism, where he very much lays out that this is a white supremacist ideology. It is not in itself Judaism. It is a manipulation of Judaism for people who are using that as license to oppress people. But what I am going to say in this video is that you should understand that this same doctrine has been used to justify African oppression. And if you actually understand the history of the state of Israel, prior to 1948, Israel obviously did not exist. And at that time, you had a people who were in search of somewhere to go because they suffered horrible oppression under the Holocaust. Now, there were people who were in search, but there were also people behind the scenes who were doing this, not because they really wanted to bring their people to a land where everyone would be treated equally, but because they wanted to do this as a power play. They wanted to do this as a way to push people out of Palestine eventually. But on the road to pushing those people out of Palestine who have been indigenous to this region, emphasize they are indigenous, that is their land. On their road to that, they decided to develop plans and schemes as ways to facilitate power, with the eventual purpose and the eventual goal of going to where they are right now, Palestine, and putting a state that they were going to say is the nation of Israel there. It's important for you to know, Africans, that before going to Palestine, that this same system was willing to go anywhere. One of the places that they were willing to go was Africa. I don't even want to assume that you guys know this. Let's just go back. Zionism. You have Judaism, but Judaism is a religion. You have Zionism. Zionism is a belief that people who are adherent to the Jewish religion, which overwhelmingly does not pertain to all Jews, pertains to Jews who came out of Europe. Those people, though, the people who adhere to that religion should have a homeland, and that homeland should be what is Palestine, despite the fact that since the original inhabitants, who were Hebrew of that particular province, have not lived there for a long time. They have been spread all over the earth. And if you actually understand that the people who are Palestinian, they did studies on those people. Those people are actually closest related to the actual Hebrews who were expelled from that land. When they do DNA studies on them, I'll actually post a link to one that you can read for yourself. So these are people who are indigenous to this region. I'm trying to paint that picture for you. Yet this ideology will say that, hey, we're going to create a religious state. We're going to create a state that says that if you're of a religion, you can come to this state. And like I said, if you look in practice, that has only been to the benefit of people who came out of Europe, because Ethiopian Jews are facing mass discrimination there. Other African people, I think Uganda has a large Jewish community, mass discrimination when they are actually able to get in, because a lot of them are not allowed to actually locate there. So we should understand that in practice, it's not all people who practice Judaism, but that's the belief in Zionism. And that's something that, if you think about it, on its face is racist. And I'm going to get into that in a later video. I don't want to get into that in this video, but the idea that people with a preference of coming out of Europe can claim a land that they're not indigenous to them, and that they can enforce on the population their rules, their society, and slowly take all their land. That is what America did. That is what all white supremacist structures did. That's what South Africa did, and it's no different. So we should understand Zionism versus Judaism. And Kwame Ture, as I said, broke that down very beautifully inside of a long speech. That speech is a must watch for all people who are concerned with African liberation. So that will be inside of the description. I'm going to give a very small taste, of some takeaways that I think people should recognize. So one, you should understand that prior to going to Palestine, that the people, the Zionists, were looking for places to go. One of the places that they were looking to go was Uganda. And there's you should look up something. It's called the Uganda Scheme. The Uganda Scheme is essentially there's this proposal that, well, we can't get Palestine yet, so let's go to Uganda, and we're going to have the same thing that they have in Israel there. They're going to have a state. Okay, so I want you to kind of understand why this is close to us as an African people. This could have easily been us. And we have already lived this inside of many pockets of the African continent. But this could have been another extension of that. And it would have been, again, one that is going to be a religious state, that is going to be of benefit to people who are coming out of Europe. Another place in Africa that was going to be the Jewish state was in Kenya. So Kenyan people, you should understand, and you already dealt with apartheid inside of your country. This was going to also be you. This I'm actually going to read from a document I'm going to post that explains the negotiations that were going on. It says, after lengthy negotiations between representatives of the Foreign Office, including Chamberlain himself, and a representative of the Zionist movement, notably Leopold Green, and it cuts off. And Theodor Herzl, he is the person who invented Zionism, who was not religious. He was an atheist. In 1903, the British government officially offered the newly formed Zionist organization a large portion of land in Kenya Highlands to be set aside as a new home for European Jews. Okay. You hear that? It was specifically for European Jews. Okay. They said the offer was a free grant of land, about 5,000 square feet, or 3,200,000 acres. In fact, let me go back. I said 5,000 square feet, 5,000 square miles, or 3,200,000 acres. Politically, the settlement was to be an autonomous state with a local self-government under a Jewish governor with complete religious and social freedom as reflected in Jewish customs, law, and traditional beliefs. The Zionist leaders also demanded that once the settlement was established, its inhabitants must control immigration, internal administration, taxes, and appointments of the local officials, as well as judges. Theodor Herzl and other Zionist leaders in England accepted the offer as an antechamber to the Holy Land, meaning this is what's going to get them to the Holy Land, a stepping stone or a preliminary step towards the ultimate Jewish restoration to Palestine. Although the Zionist leaders were considering all areas, such as El Arish and Sinai Peninsula, the Belgian Congo also Mozambique, South Africa, for instance, Kenya was regarded during this particular time as the most promising area. However, Herzl and his associates had to yield, as we shall see shortly, to the waves of protest from Russian Jewry, which saw this as a betrayal of the Zionist ideal, the Zionist ideal being going actually to Palestine. So this was an excerpt from reading The Search for a Zionist Settlement in Kenya. It will be inside of the description. So what we should understand is that, well, don't understand. I ask you to question yourself. What of this ideology, if you are someone who believes in this and you've been taught this by your preacher, what of this is actually justified by your beliefs? What of this is actually reflected in your religious doctrine? What of this is actually the living, breathing word? Like, what of this is? And you should be very critical to actually investigate what was. Why do we believe that Palestine should be owed to people who are Zionists? Why? Why do you believe that people who are brothers and sisters in Palestine? Why do you feel okay that their lives are being taken? Why are you feeling comfortable co-signing genocide? What beliefs make you think that this is right? And if you do the research, I think you will come to the answer. The answer is that there's no real basis if you're talking about a religious basis. The basis is that, as Joe Biden says in this video right here, the United States needed a satellite inside.
If we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Because of that satellite, they are going to continue to be able to ensure that their interest is being met. That's really the only reason. And if you look at what's happening, if you look at how the world is silent, the people who have said never again, remember they said never again as far as genocide, allowing a genocide to happen right before our eyes, you should understand clearly that this is not a simple, oh, these are the people who rightfully inherited the land. And by the way, I want you to actually go to the actual scriptures that they use to justify that, because the scriptures that they use, if you actually look in more in context of history, you will see that it's more so discussing Babylonian captivity. And I'm talking specifically about biblical scriptures, obviously. But the point I'm trying to get at is that you should understand clearly that this has been a misrepresentation, and it's been a misrepresentation in the benefit of white supremacy. But my last thing I'm going to say about this is that this shouldn't even have mattered whenever it comes to pulling up what was going to happen in Uganda, or pulling up, how these things have been misinterpreted. Just out of love, people, you should be outraged. And just out of love, you should be able to stand up and say, no, this is not okay. Don't let any preacher, do not let any, I'm saying this right now, don't let any elder, don't let any advisor stop you from saying, no, genocide is wrong. No, murder is wrong. No, ethnic cleansing is wrong. Don't let any person do that, because at the basic level, you have a duty to speak truth. You have a duty to fight for oppression. You have a duty to love your neighbors. You have that duty. And so I hope that if this video did anything for those who actually were of that belief, that it woke you up to the fact that this is a manipulation and you are being used by the system. You are being used. And it's really up to you whether or not you're going to use your own spiritual convictions and say that there's nothing okay with what's happening. There's nothing biblical with what's happening. There's nothing just with what's happening until you can use your own spiritual convictions. Understand you are on the wrong side at this very moment. That is all I have on this. I hope, again, that this gets to specifically people, again, who have been brought into a wrong ideology. We can always be hopeful, and I'm being hopeful with this video, but ultimately I want to hear you guys' comments, particularly what are your thoughts on the fact that many people have co-signed this who all common sense should say that this is wrong. And more so, how do we get ourselves out of this mindset and get to something that's going to free our people collectively? That's all I have. I will see you all in the next video.
A poem for us, the African woman. Beautiful, dark, luxurious, fearless, selfless, power. Through all the words thrown our way, we are the beautiful source, discarded, disrespected, but highly favored and replicated. We are her, she is us, the African woman. Uncompromising, steadfast, and unwavering in love. Innocent, playful, generous, and deserving. We are African women. At home and abroad, we are delicious melanin, splendid carbon. We drink ourselves to death with love and compassion, forgiving and thorough. We are African women. Join us in May for our symposium on Pan-African women.
Hey family, this is Tierney Cherie. I'm here to make an announcement that I'm very, very excited to make. I'm excited because I really think this is something that is important for our people. Otherwise, I would not have devoted so much time and energy towards it. So I finished my first book, and the book title is Fostering False Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. Now, why is this book something that I think will be very important for our community? Well, number one, it's dealing with the system of white supremacy, particularly the way that the system has targeted our children. If you don't know, our children are literally our future. Without our children, we have no future. And so understand that the system is very crafty when figuring out what to derail first. And to me, it's no mistake that the system particularly went after the Black family. If you look at what happened whenever we were enslaved by this system, and continues to go after the Black family, continues to go after Black children, continues to try to villainize African parents. So for that, I wanted to particularly talk about this subject. Now, the other thing that the book will deal with is our African identities. Why is it that our African identities are a threat to this system? Why is it that whenever we want to identify ourselves as being African, we get so much drawback inside of the Black community? I think a lot of us are not aware of the history of assimilationist thought inside of our community, this idea that we have to be close to white in order to be accepted. And so that's another subject that we delve into in this book. So I'm hoping that anyone who is, obviously, if you're a parent, a Black parent and you really want to understand why it is that these systems are going after your children, I encourage you to read this book. I hope that it will arm you with a lot of knowledge and a lot of foresight, not just about how to protect your own children, but how to organize in your community, because that's really the purpose of the book, is to say that we have to organize among ourselves in order to protect ourselves from this white supremacist system. And then obviously, if you're an organizer in general, this is something that I think is important for you to read, because like I said, this is a subject in the Black community that we just don't discuss enough. Child welfare is not something that is going to get enough attention. People, obviously, we organize them around other causes, but this is one that is really important that I feel like we have to pay more attention to.